Alright, welcome back everybody to Skyrim Scholar Survival. I had just gotten rid of my rocks joint. And I'm here now in Riften. And what I'm going to be doing first... Oh, I got a bunny last time. This is Thistle. They're going to be following me around. So this episode, I'm going to do some reading here. We have the full songs of the Pelinal, and we're gonna get through that. Alright, let's pull that up on my spreadsheet. Alright, here we go. The Song of Pelinal, Volume 1, on his name. Editor's note: Volumes 1 through 6 are taken from the so-called Remen manuscript located in the Imperial Library. It is a transcription of older fragments collected by an unknown scholar of the early Second Era. Beyond this, little is known of the original sources of these fragments, some of which appear to be from the same period, perhaps even from the same manuscript. But as no scholarly consensus yet exists on dating these 6 fragments, no opinions will be offered here. That he took the name Pelinal was passing strange, no matter his later sobriquets, which were many. That was an elvish name, and Pelinal was a scourge on that race, and not much given to irony. Pelinal was much too grim for that. Even in youth he wore white hair, and trouble followed him. Perhaps his enemies named Pelinal of their own in their tongue, but that is doubtful, for it means glorious night, and he was neither to them. Certainly many others added to that name during his days in Tamriel. He was Pelinal the White Strake, because of his left hand, made of a killing light. He was Pelinal the Bloody, for he drank it in victory. He was Pelinal Insurgent, because he gave the Crusades a face. He was Pelinal in Triumph, as the words eventually became synonymous, and men at arms gave thanks to the Eight when they saw his banner coming through the war. He was Pelinal the Blamer, for he was quick to admonish those allies that favored tactics that ran counter to his, that is, sword theory. And he was Pelinal the Third, though whether this was because some said he was a god geyser who had incarnated twice before already, or that simpler, he was the third vision given to Perif and on Alessia in her prayers of liberation before he walked among the quarters of rebellion is unknown. A short one. Pelinal, Volume 2, on his coming. Alright, read this already. And then Perif spoke to the handmaiden again, eyes to the heavens which had not known kindness since the beginning of elven rule. And she spoke as a mortal whose kindle is beloved by the gods, for its strength in weakness, a humility that can burn with metaphor and yet break easily and always doomed to end in death. And this is why those who let their souls burn anyway are beloved of the dragon and his kin. And she said, "And this thing I have thought of, I have named it, and I have called it freedom," which I think is just another word for Shezar, who goes missing, you, who made the first rain at his sundering, and that is what I ask now of our alien masters, that we might sunder them fully and repay their cruelty by dispersing them to drown in the Topal Morihas, your son, mighty and snorting, gore-horned, winged, when next he flies down, let him bring us anger. And then Kine granted Perif another symbol, a diamond soaked red with the blood of elves, whose facets could unsector and form into a man, whose every angle could cut her jailers and a name, Pelinal, which is the star-made knight. He was arrayed in armor from the future time, and he walked into the jungles of Kairod, already killing, Morihas stamping at his side, froth bloody and bellowing from excitement, because the Pelinal was come. And Pelinal came to Perif's camp of rebels, holding a sword and mace, both encrusted with the smashed viscera of elven faces, feathers and magic beads, which were the markings of the Aeli and Elidun, stuck to the redness that hung from his weapons, and he lifted them, saying, "These were their eastern chieftains, no longer full of their talking." Alright, Volume 3. Song of Pelinal, Volume 3, On His Enemy. Alright, read that. Pelinal Whitestrake was the enemy of all elf kind that lived in Kairod in those days. Mainly, though, he took it upon himself to slay the sorcerer kings of the Iliads, as in prearranged open combats rather than at war. The fields of rebellion he left to the growing armies of the Paravania and his bull nephew. Pelinal called out Harrowmire of Copper and Tea into a duel at the Tor, and ate his neck veins while screaming praise to Remen, a name that no one knew yet. Gordhar, the Shaper's head, was smashed upon the goat-faced altar of Nidandava, and in his wisdom Pelinal said a small plague spell to keep that evil from reforming by well-kind magic. Later that season, Pelinal slew Hadhul on the granite steps of Seyatar, the Fire King's spears, knowing their first refute. For a time no weapon of the Iliads could pierce his armor, which Pelinal admitted was unlike any crafted by men, but would say no more even when pressed. When Huna, whom Pelinal raised from grain slave to hoplite and loved well, took death from an arrowhead made from the beak of the Calethelel, the singer, the Whitestrake went on his first madness. He wrought destruction from Narlime all the way to Cyrodiil, and erased those lands from the maps of elves and men, and all things in them, and Perif was forced to make sacrifice to the gods to keep them from leaving the earth in their disgust. And then came the storming of White Gold, where the Iliads had made pact with the Aurorans of Meridia, and summoned them, and appointed the terrible golden-hued half-elf Umaril the Unfeathered as their champion. And, for the first time since his coming, it was Pelinal who was called out to battle by another. For Umaril had the blood of the Ada and would never know death. Volume 4, On His Deeds. Pelinal drove the sorcerer armies past the Niben, claiming all the eastern lands for the rebellion of the Paravania, and Kine had to send her rain to wash the blood from the villages and forts that no longer flew Iliad banners, for the armies of men needed to make camps of them as they went forward. And he broke the doors open for the prisoners of the Fatak, with the slave queen flying on Morihas above them, and men called her Aelish for the first time. He entered the gate to win back the hands of the 1,000 strong of Sedor, a tribe now unknown but famous in those days, which the Aelids had stolen in the night. 2,000 hands that he brought back in a wagon made of demon bone, whose wheels trailed the sound of women when ill at heart. Text lost. And after the first pogrom, which consolidated the northern holdings for the men of Kurth, he stood with white hair gone brown with elf blood at the bridge of Heldon, where Perif's falconers had sent for the Nords, and they, looking at him, said that Shor had returned. But he spat at their feet for profaning that name. He led them away into the heart of the hitherland west, to drive the Aelids inward, towards the Tower of White Gold, a slow retreating circle that could not understand the power of man's sudden liberty, and what fury idea had brought. His mace crushed the thundernacks that Umaril sent as harriers on the rebellion's long march back south and east, and carried Morihas' breath of kine to Zuthoth's, the clever-cutting man, a Nedi with a Keptu name, for healing, when the bull had fallen to a volley of bird beaks. And of course at the Council of Skiffs, where all of the Paravania's armies and all of the Nords shook with fear at the storming of White Gold, so much so that the Aelish herself counseled delay. Pelinal grew furious and made names of Umaril and made names of what cowards he thought he saw around him, and then made for the tower by himself, for Pelinal often acted without thought. Alright, Volume 5. On his love of Morihas. It is a solid truth that Morihas was the son of Cain, but whether or not Pelinal was indeed the Shezarin is best left unsaid. For once, Plantinu, who favored the short sword, said it, and that night he was smothered by moths. It is famous, though, that the two talked of each other as family, when Morihas as the lesser, and that Pelinal loved him and called him nephew. But these could be merely the fancies of immortals. Never did Pelinal counsel Morihas in times of war, for the man-bull fought magnificently and led man well, and never resorted to madness. But the white strake did warn against the growing love of Perith. We are Ada more, and change things through love. We must take care lest we beget more monsters on this earth. If you do not desist, she will take to you, and you will transform all Kairad if you do this. And to this the bull became shy, for he was a bull, and he felt his form too ugly for the Paravania at all times, especially when she disrobed for him. He snorted, though, and shook his nose hoop into the light of Secunda moon and said, "She is like this shine on my nose hoop here, an accident sometimes, but whenever I move my head at night, she is there. And so you know what you must ask is impossible." Oh, so is he like... I do know that in Oblivion there are minotaurs, so is it like he's a minotaur, right? Alright, number 6. Also, is Pelinal? Pelinal is a lady, right? No. I'm confused a little on. I don't know Pelinal's gender at this time. I'm a little confused on that. I have to go back. It says him. Is it kind of like the whole pseudo-love of, I forget this is the Greek dude that in Hades. I know it wasn't actually, but all right, moving on. Volume 6 on his madness. Okay. And it is said that he emerged into the world like a padomaic that is born by Sithis and all the forces of change therein. Still others, like Fifth of New Teed, said that beneath the Pelinal's star armor was a chest that gaped open to show no heart, only a red rage-shaped diamond fashion, singing like a mindless dragon, and that this was proof that he was a myth echo, and that where he trod there were shapes of the first urging. Pelinal cared for none of this, and killed any who would speak god logic, except for fair Perif, who he said enacts rather than talks, as language without exertion is dead witness. When those soldiers who heard him say this stared blankly, he laughed, and swung his sword, running into the rain of kine to slaughter their Iliad captors, screaming, O Akka, for our shared madness I do this. I watch you watching me, watching back. Umaril dares call us out, for that is how we made him. And it was during these fits of anger and nonsense that Pelinal would fall into the madness, where whole swaths of land were devoured in divine rampage to become void, and Alessia would have to pray to the gods for their succor, and they would reach down as one mind and soothe the white strake until he no longer had the will to kill the earth in whole. And Garrett of the men of G once saw such a madness from afar and maneuvered, after it had abated, to drink together with Pelinal, and he asked what such an affliction felt like, to which Pelinal could only answer, like when the dream no longer needs its dreamer. Pretty cool. Alright. Number 7. Song of Pelinal, Volume 7, on his battle with Umaril and his dismemberment. Alright, that's still the same. Oh, there's like a tiny little picture. Look at that. That's cool. And so after many battles with Umaril's allies, where dead Aurorans lay like candlelight around the throne, Pelinal became surrounded by the last Iliad sorcerer kings and their demons, each one heavy with virulence. The white strake cracked the floor with his mace, and they withdrew. And he said, "Bring me Umaril, that called me out." And while mighty in his aspect and wicked, deathless golden Umaril favored ruin from afar over close combat, and so he tarried in the shadows of the White Tower before coming forth. More soldiers were sent against Pelinal to die, and yet they managed to pierce his armor with axes and arrows, for Umaril had wrought each one by long varliance, which he had been hoarding since his first issue of challenge. Presently the half-elf showed himself, bathed in meridian light, and he listed his bloodline in the Iliadun, and spoke of his father, a god of the previous Kalpa's world river, and taking great delight in the heavy breathing of Pelinal, who had finally bled. Text lost. And Umaril was laid low, the angel face of his helm dented into an ugliness which made Pelinal laugh, and his unfeathered wings broke off with sword strokes delivered while Pelinal stood frothing above him, insulting his ancestry, and anyone else that took ship from old Elnofe, which angered the other elvish kings and drove them into a madness of their own. And they fell on him, speaking to their weapons, cutting the Pelinal into eights, while he roared in confusion, which even the council of skiffs could hear. Text lost. Ran when more shook the whole of the tower with mighty bashing from his horns the next morning, and some were slain in overabundance in the taking, and men looked for more aliens to kill, but Pelinal had left none save those kings and demons that had already begun to flee. It was Morihas who found the White Strake's head, which the kings had left to prove their deeds, and they spoke, and Pelinal said things of regrets. But the rebellion had turned away, and more words were said between these immortals that even the Paravant would not deign to hear. All right, last volume. On his revelation at the death of the Ailish. And left you to gather sinew with my other half, who will bring light thereby to that mortal idea that brings the gods great joy, that is, freedom, which even the heavens do not truly know, which is why our father, the text lost. In those first days spirit swirls before convention, that which we echo in our earthly madness. Let us now take you up. We will show our true faces, which eat one another in amnesia each age. All right. That was interesting. That at least gets me a lot of books crossed out. Let's mark those all off. Yeah, pretty good. Okay. Any other books?
Lady Mara bids you welcome to her benevolence.
All right, thank you. Aedra and Daedra, I'm pretty sure I read this. Oh, I have not. Huh. All right. Aedra and Daedra. The designations of gods, demons, Aedra and Daedra are universally confusing to the layman. They are often used interchangeably. Aedra and Daedra are not relative terms. They are elvish and exact. Azura is a Daedra both in Skyrim and Morrowind. Aedra is usually translated as ancestor, which is as close as Cyrodiilic can come to the elven concept. Daedra means roughly, not our ancestors. This distinction was crucial to the Dunmer, whose fundamental split in ideology is represented in their mythical genealogy. Aedra are associated with stasis. Daedra represent change. Aedra create the mortal world and are bound to the earth bones. Daedra, who cannot create, have the power to change. As part of the divine contract of creation, the Aedra can be killed. Witness Lorkhan and the Moons. The Protean Daedra, for whom the rules do not apply, can only be banished. Alright, that's a short one. A Child's Unead. So yeah, I think this is going to be mainly a reading episode. Oh, a children's Unead. Alright, a children's Anuad. A children's Anuad. The Anuad paraphrased. The first ones were brothers, Anu and Padome. They came into the void, and time began. As Anu and Padome wandered the void, the interplay of light and darkness created Nur. Both Anu and Padome were amazed and delighted with her appearance, but she loved Anu, and Padome retreated from them in bitterness. Nur became pregnant, but before she gave birth, Padome returned, professing his love for Nur. She told him that she loved only Anu, and Padome beat her in rage. Anu returned, fought Padome, and cast him outside time. Nur gave birth to creation, but died from her injuries soon after. Anu, grieving, hid himself in the sun and slept. Meanwhile, life sprang up on the 12 worlds of creation and flourished. After many ages, Padme was able to return to time. He saw creation and hated it. He swung his sword, shattering the 12 worlds in their alignment. Anu awoke and fought Padme again. The long and furious battle ended with Anu the victor. He cast aside the body of his brother, who he believed was dead, and attempted to save creation by forming the remnants of the 12 worlds into one, Nirn, the world of Tamriel. After he was doing so, as he was doing so, Padme struck him through the chest with one last blow. Anu grappled with his brother and pulled them both outside time forever. The blood of Padme became the Daedra, and the blood of Anu became the stars. The mingled blood of both became the Aedra, hence their capacity for good and evil, and their great affinity for earthly affairs than the Daedra, who have no concept of connection to creation. On the world of Nirn, all was chaos. The only survivors of the 12 worlds of creation were the El-Nofi and the Hist. The El-Nofi are the ancestors of Mer and Men. The Hist are the trees of Argonia. Nirn originally was all land, with her interspersed seas, but no oceans. The large fragment of El-Nofi world landed on Nirn, relatively intact, and the El-Nofi living there were the ancestors of the Mer. These El-Nofi fortified their borders from the chaos outside and hid their pocket of calm and attempted to live on as before. Other El-Nofi arrived on Nirn, scattered amid the confusing jumble of the shattered worlds, wandering and finding each other over the years. Eventually, the wandering El-Nofi found the hidden land of old El-Nofi, and were amazed and joyful to find their kin living amid the splendor of ages past. The wandering El-Nofi expected to be welcomed into the peaceful realm, but the old El-Nofi looked on them as degenerates, fallen from their former glory. For whatever reason, war broke out and raged across the whole of Nirn. The old El-Nofi retained their ancient power and knowledge, but the Wanderers were more numerous and toughened by their long struggle to survive on Nirn. This war reshaped the face of Nirn, sinking much of the land beneath new oceans and leaving the lands as we know them: Tamriel, Akavir, Atmora, and Yokuda. The old El-Nofi realm, although ruined, became Tamriel. The remnants of the Wanderers were left divided on the other 3 continents. Over many years, the El-Nofi of Tamriel became the Mer elves, the Dwemer, the deep ones, sometimes called dwarves, the Chirmer, the changed ones, who later became the Dunmer, the Dunmer, the dark or cursed ones, the dark elves, the Bosmer, the green or forest ones, the wood elves, and the Altmer, the elder or high ones, the high elves. On the other continents, the wandering El-Nofi became the men: the Nords of Atmora, the Red Guards of Yokuda, and the Tsasik of Akavir. The Hist were bystanders in the El-Nofi war, but most of their realm was destroyed as the war passed over it. A small corner of it survived to become Black Marsh in Tamriel, but most of their realm was sunk beneath the sea. Eventually men returned to Tamriel, and the Nords were the first, colonizing the northern coast of Tamriel before recorded history, led by the legendary Ysgramor. The 13th of his line, King Harald, was the first to appear in written history, and so the mythic era ended. So that's lore. The monomyth. Alright, monomyth. In Mundus, conflict and disparity are what bring change, and change is the most sacred of the elven forces. Change is the force without force or origin. Oeg Nither. Taherite, Order of Sigik. Simply put, the schism of the human Aldmiri worldview is the mortal's relationship to the divine. Humans take the humble path that they were created by the immortal forces, while the Aldmer claim descent from them. It doesn't seem like much, but it is a distinction that colors the rest of their diverging mythologies. All Tamrielic religions begin the same. Man or Mer, things begin with the dualism of Anu and his other. These twin forces go by many names. Anu Padme, Anuel Sithis, Ak-El, Sakek, Akel, is not. Anuel is the everlasting, ineffable light. Sithis is the corrupting, inexorable action. In the middle is the gray, maybe. Nern in the El Nofex. In those cultures, Aniel is honored for his part of the interplay that creates the world, but Sithis is held in highest esteem because he's the one that causes the reaction. Sithis is thus the original creator, an entity who intrinsically causes change without design. Even the Hist acknowledge this being. Anuel is also perceived of as order, opposed to the Sithis, chaos. Perhaps it is easier for mortals to envision change than perfect stasis, for often Anuel is regulated to the mythic background of Sithis' fancies. In Yokudan folktales, which are among the most vivid in the world, Satak is only referred to a handful of times as the hum. He is a force so prevalent as to be not really there at all. In any case, from these two beings spring the Et-Ada, or original spirits. To humans, these Et-Ada are the gods and demons. To the Aldmer, the Aedra Daedra, or the ancestors. All of the Tamrielic pantheons fill their rosters from these Et-Ada, though divine membership often differs from culture to culture. Like Anu and Padme, though, every one of these pantheons contains the archetypes of the dragon god and the missing god. The dragon god and the missing god. The dragon god is always related to time, and is universally revered as the first god. He is often called Akatosh, whose perch from eternity allowed the day. He is the central god of the Cyrodiilic Empire. The missing god is always related to the mortal plane, and is a key figure in the human Aldmeri schism. The missing refers to either his palpable essence from the pantheon, another mental distress that is interpreted a variety of ways, or the removal of his divine spark by the other immortals. He is often called Lorcan, and his epitaphs are many, equally damnable and devout. Note that Tamriel and the mortal plane do not exist yet. The gray, maybe, is still the playground of the original spirits. Some are more bound to Anu's light, others to the unknowable void. Their constant flux and interplay increase their number, and their personalities take long to congeal. When Akatosh forms, time begins, and it becomes easier for some spirits to realize themselves as beings with a past and a future. The strongest of the recognizable spirits crystallize. Mephala, Arche, Ylfir, Magnus, Rupgata, etc., etc. Others remain as concepts, ideas, or emotions. One of the strongest of these, a barely formed urge that the others call Lorkhan, details a plan to create Mundus, the mortal plane. Humans, with the exception of the Red Guards, see this act as a divine mercy, an enlightenment whereby lesser creatures can reach immortality. Aldmer, with the exception of the Dark Elves, see this act as a cruel deception, a trick that sundered their connection to the spirit plane. The myth of Erebus, subtitled The Sigic Compensation, Mythic Erebus, was an attempt by Artaeum apologists to explain the basics of Aldmeri religion to Uriel V in the early, glorious part of his reign. It quietly avoided any blame or bias against the Lorkhan concept, which was still held in esteem by the Cyrodiils as Shezar, the missing sibling of the divines. Despite this, the Sigic still give a nice summary of the Elder view, and it will serve our purposes here. This version comes from the archives of the Imperial Seminary, from the handwritten notes of an unknown scribe. Mythic Erebus exists, and has existed from time without measure, as a fanciful, unnatural realm. Erebus is used to connote the imperceptible penumbra, the gray center between the is not of Anu and Padme. It contains the multitude realms of Aetherius and Oblivion, as well as other less structured forms. The magical beings of mythic Erebus live for a long time and have complex narrative lives, creating the patterns of myth. These are spirits made from bits of the immortal polarity. The first of these was Akatosh, the Time Dragon, whose formation made it easier for other spirits to structure themselves. Gods and demons form and reform and procreate. Finally, the magical beings of mythic Erebus told the ultimate story, that of their own death. For some, this was an artistic transfiguration into the concrete, non-magical substance of the world. For others, this was a war in which all were slain, their bodies becoming the substance of the world. For yet others, this was a romantic marriage and parenthood, with the parents' spirits naturally having to die and give way to the succeeding mortal races. The agent of this communal decision was Lorkhan, whom most early myths vilify as a trickster or deceiver. More sympathetic versions of this story point out that Lorkhan as being the reason the mortal plane exists at all. The magical beings created the races of the mortal Erebus in their own image, either consciously as artists and craftsmen, or as the fecund rotting matter out of which the mortals sprung forth, or in a variety of other analogical senses. The magical beings then, having died, became Et-Ada. The Et-Ada are the things perceived and revered by the mortals as gods, spirits, or geniuses of Erebus. Through their deaths, these magical beings separated themselves in nature from the other magical beings of the unnatural realms. The Daedra were created at this time also, being spirits and gods more attuned to oblivion, or that realm closer to the void of Padme. This act is the dawn of the mythic Merethic era. It has been perceived by the earliest mortals many different ways, either as a joyous second creation, or especially by the elves, as a painful fracturing from the divine. The originator of the event is always Lorcan. Lorcan. This creator, trickster, tester deity is in every Tamrielic mythic tradition. His most popular name is the Aldmeri Lorcan, or Doom Drum. He convinced and contrived the original spirits to bring about the creation of the mortal plane, upsetting the status quo much like his father Padme had introduced instability into the universe in the beginning place. After the world is materialized, Lorcan is separated from his divine center, sometimes involuntarily, and wanders the creation of the Edada. Interpretations of this event differ widely by culture. Below are some of the better known. Yokudan Satakal, the World Skin. Satak was first serpent, the snake who came before, and all the worlds to come rested in the glimmer of his scales. But it was so big there was nothing but, and thus it was coiled around and around itself, and the worlds to come slid across each other, but none had room to breathe or even be, and so the worlds called to something to save them, to let them out. But of course there was nothing outside the first serpent, so aid had to come from inside it. This was Akel, the hungry stomach. Akel made itself known, and Saka could only think about what it was, and it was the best hunger. So it ate and ate. Soon there was enough room to live in the worlds, and things began. These things were new, and they often made mistakes, for there was hardly time to practice being things before. So most things ended quickly and were not good or gave up on themselves. Some things were about to start, but they were eaten up as Saka got to that part of its body. This was a violent time. So that is the snake eating itself. Pretty soon, Akel caused Saka to bite its own heart, and that was the end. The hunger soon, though, refused to stop, even in death, so the first serpent shed its skin to begin anew. As the old world died, Satakal began, and when things realized this pattern, so did they realize what their part in it was. They began to take names, like Ruptgar, or Tuhuaka, and they strode about looking for their kin. As Satakal ate itself over and over, the strongest spirits learned to bypass the cycle by moving at strange angles. They called this process the walkabout, a way of striding between the world skins. Ruptka was so big that he was able to place the stars in the sky so that the weaker spirits might find their way easier. This practice became so easy that for the spirits that it became a place called the Far Shores, a time of waiting until the next skin. Ruptka was able to sire many children through the cycles, and so he became known as the Tall Papa. He continued to place stars to map out the void for others, but after so many cycles, there were also almost too many spirits to help out. He made himself a helper from the detritus of past skins, and this was Sep, or Second Serpent. Sep had much of the same hungry stomach still left in him, multiple hungers from multiple skins. He was so hungry he could not think straight. Sometimes he would just eat the spirits, and he was supposed to help. But Tall Papa would always reach in and take them back out. Finally, tired of helping Tall Papa, Sep went and gathered the rest of the old skins and balled them up, tricking spirits to help him, promising them this was how you reached the new world, by making one out of the old. These spirits loved this way of living, as it was easier, no more jumping from place to place. Many spirits joined in, believing this was good thinking. Tall Papa just shook his head. Pretty soon the spirits on the skin ball started to die, because they were very far from the real world of Setakal. And they found that it was too far to jump into the far shores now. The spirits that were left pleaded with Tall Papa to take them back, but Grim Ruptka would not, and he told the spirits that they must learn new ways to follow the stars to the far shores now. If they could not, they must live on through their children, which was not the same as before. Sep, however, needed more punishment, and so Tall Papa squashed the snake with a big stick. The hunger fell out of Sep's dead mouth and was the only thing left of the second serpent. While the rest of the new world was allowed to strive back to godhood, Sep could only slink around in a dead skin, or swim about in the sky, a hungry void that jealously tries to eat the stars. All right, 1 second. I need to hydrate. This is a big book, long book, but I am getting some. I love lore mythology. A good one too. I never really learned a lot about the whole the whole lore of the Elder Scrolls games. I am now. It's pretty cool. Cyrodiilic Caesar's Song. This was a new thing that Caesar described to the gods, becoming mothers and fathers, being responsible and making great sacrifices, with no guarantee of success. But Caesar spoke beautifully to them, and moved them beyond mystery and tears. Thus the Aedra gave free birth to the world, the beasts and the beings making these things from parts of themselves. This free birth was very painful, and afterwards the Aedra were no longer young and strong and powerful, as they had been from the beginning of days. Some Aedra were disappointed and bitter in their loss, and angry with Caesar and with all creation, for they felt Caesar had lied and tricked them. These Aedra, the gods of the Aldmer, led by Auriel, were disgusted by their enfeebled selves, and by what they had created. Everything is spoiled for now, and for all time, and the most we can do is teach the elven races to suffer nobly, with dignity, and chastise ourselves for our folly, and avenge ourselves upon Caesar and his allies. Thus are the gods of the elves dark and brooding, and thus are the elves ever dissatisfied with mortality, and always proud and stoic despite the harshness of this cruel and indifferent world. Other Aedra looked upon creation and were well pleased. These Aedra, the gods of men and beast folk, led by Akatosh, praised and cherished their wards of the mortal races. We have suffered and are diminished for all time, but the mortal world we have made is glorious, filling our hearts and spirits with hope. Let us teach the mortal races to live well, to cherish beauty and honor, and to love one another as we love them. Thus are the gods of men tender and patient, and thus are men and beast folk great in heart for joy or suffering, and ambitious for greater wisdom and a better world. Now when the Daedra lords heard Caesar, they mocked him and the other Aedra. Cut part of ourselves off and lose them forever? That's stupid. You'll be sorry. We are far smarter than you, for we will create a new world out of ourselves, but we will not cut it off or let it mock us. But we will make this world within ourselves, forever ourselves, and under our complete control. So the Daedra Lords created the Daedric realms, and all the ranks of lesser Daedra, great and small. And, for the most part, the Daedra Lords were well pleased with their arrangement, for they always had worshippers and servants and playthings close at hand. But at the same time, they sometimes looked with envy upon the mortal realms, for those mortals were foul and feeble and contemptible. Their passions and ambitions were also far more surprising and entertaining than the antics of the lesser Daedra. Thus do the Daedra Lords court and seduce certain amusing specimens of the mortal races, especially the passionate and powerful. It gives the Daedra Lords special pleasure to steal away from Shazar and the Aedra, the greatest and most ambitious mortals. Not only are you fools to mutilate yourselves, gloat the Daedra Lords, but you cannot even keep the best pieces, which prefer the glory and power of the Daedra Lords to the feeble vulgarity of the mush-minded Aedra. Altmiri, the heart of the world. Anu encompassed and encompasses all things, so that he might know himself. He created Anuel, his soul and the soul of all things. Anuel, as all souls, was given to self-reflection, and for this he needed to differentiate between his forms, attributes, and intellects. Thus was born Sithis, who was the sum of all the limitations of Anuel, would utilize to ponder himself. Anuel, who was the soul of all things, therefore became many things, and this interplay was and is the Erebus. At first the Erebus was turbulent and confusing, as Anuel's ruminations went on without design. Aspects of Erebus then asked for a schedule to follow, or procedures whereby they might enjoy themselves a little longer outside of perfect knowledge. So that he might know himself this way, too, Anu created Ariel, the soul of his soul. Ariel bled through to Erebus as a new force called time. With time, various aspects of Erebus began to understand their natures and limitations. They took names like Magnus or Mara or Xen. One of these, Lorcan, was more of a limit than a nature, so he could never last long anywhere. As he entered every aspect of Anuel, Lorcan would plant an idea that was almost wholly based on limitation. He outlined a plan to create a soul for the Erebus, a place where the aspects might even be allowed to self-reflect. He gained many followers. Even Auriel, when told he would become the king of the New World, agreed to help Lorcan. So they created the Mundus, where their own aspects might live, and became the Et Ada. But this was a trick. As Lorcan knew, this world contained more limitations, that not and was therefore hardly a thing of Anu at all. Mundus was the house of Sithis. As their aspects began to die off, many of the Et Ada vanished completely. Some escaped, like Magnus, and that is why there are no limitations to magic. Others, like Yifer, transformed themselves into the El Nofi, the earth bones, so that the whole world might not die. Some had to marry and make children, just to last. Each generation was weaker than the last, and soon there were Aldmer. Darkness caved in. Lorcan made armies out of the weakest souls and named them men, and they brought Sithis into every quarter. Auriel pleaded with Anu to take them back, but he had already filled their places with something else. But his soul was gentler, and granted Auriel his bow and shield, so that he might save the Aldmer from the hordes of men. Some had already fallen, like the Chimmer, who listened to tainted Et Ada, and others, like the Bosmer, who had soiled time's line by taking mannish wives. Auriel could not save Altmora the Elderwood, and it was lost to men. They were chased south and east to old El Nofi, and Lorcan was close behind. He shattered that land into many. Finally, Trinmac, Auriel's greatest knight, knocked Lorcan down in front of his army and reached in with more than hands to take his heart. He was undone. The men dragged Lorcan's body away and swore blood vengeance on the heirs of Auriel for all time. But Trinmac and Auriel tried to destroy the heart of Lorcan. It laughed at them. It said, "This heart is the heart of the world, for one was made to satisfy the other." And Auriel fastened the thing to an arrow and let it fly long into the sea, where no aspect of the new world may ever find it. Alright. Whew. That was a monomyth. Monolith of myths. Whew, that's my time at. Did I read for a whole hour? Roughly. I think I have time for one more book. Hopefully. Let me just drink a little bit of water. I think my pronunciations are getting better, at least. Oh, I didn't mean to take that. Read it. Mark that off. The Trials of Saint... Oh, hold on. Trials of Saint Alessia. Akatosh made a covenant with Alessia in those days so long ago. He gathered the tangled skeins of oblivion and knit them fast with the bloody sinews of his heart, and gave them to Alessia, saying, "This shall be my token to you, that so long as your blood and oath hold true, yet so shall my blood and oath be true to you. This token shall be the amulet of kings, and the covenant shall be made between us, for I am the king of spirits, and you are the queen of mortals. As you shall stand witness for all mortal flesh, so shall I stand witness for all immortal spirits." And Akatosh drew from his breast a burning handful of his heart's blood, and he gave it to Alessia's hand, saying, "This shall also be a token to you for our joined blood and pledged faith. So long as you and your descendants shall wear the amulet of kings, then shall this dragon fire burn, an eternal flame, as a sign to all men and gods of our faithfulness. So long as the dragon fires shall burn, to you and to all generations I swear that my heart's blood shall hold fast the gates of oblivion. So long as the blood of the dragon runs strong in her rulers, the glory of the empire shall extend in unbroken years. But should the dragon fires fail, and should no heir of our joined blood wear the amulet of kings, then shall the empire descend into darkness, and the demon lords of Mizrul shall govern the land. From the liturgy of the rekindling of the dragon fires. Yeah, so that's a little bit of oblivion right there. Any more books?
Need something?
Yeah, you have any more books? You got a ruin book in here. Why do you have a ruin book in here? Ah, and there's, I think, one more. Right here. Gods and Worship. I might have already read this. Yeah, I already read this book. Oh well. think that was it for now. Yeah, I just reached an hour. Good amount of reading. Alright. I think that'll do it for now. Get a nice shot here. There we go. Very nice. Okay. See, I think that was a nice bit of reading. Next time, we're actually going to be doing some stuff. We are going to first... Well, we're going to do a lot of things in Riften. Catch some seas at the Bee and Barb. Kill Grilla the Kind. Start a little bit of the Thief's Quests. As well as, I think there is a... let me check. I think there was... yeah, Nocturnal. There's that quest, and I get a really cool, arbor piece out of that one. So yeah, I think I'll just load up on as many quests here as I can, and just, you know, crank them out as we go. And then eventually, I'm going to be making my way either north or back west to find another horse. I think I'm pretty okay with the one I have currently, but I do want to see what other horses they have, you know, out here. Wild, running free. Alright. Well, I hope you like my narration. Stop back in next time. I'll read it off and on. It won't be a full read-through. I think only some episodes I'll dedicate to a full read-through. This is one of those. Alright. We'll continue the story of Blazerasinge next time. Mainly to get some food. Alright. Take care, everybody. Ciao, ciao.